On this, Jennifer Carroll MacNeill, a defence of Garda actions on the day, of the strategy they employed. We heard a full timeline of how the protests, I suppose, escalated from the stabbings, and then, the gathering outside the Garden of Remembrance, then this crowd that gathered, and, by the Lewis tracks, and how it all developed into what was really a city out of control by the night. Should he have accepted some portion of responsibility as Garda Commissioner?
Look, I think everybody has to accept responsibility for something that was absolutely a disaster for Dublin city centre.
But although he didn't do that today.
The events leading up to that were two things that have never happened before, and certainly never happened together. A stabbing of that kind outside a school, a Gardaí trying to preserve the crime scene, trying to preserve evidence, which is fundamental to any investigation. And then, as you have said, the building events that happened alongside that. And I mean, there has been an approach which is to try to dampen down the activist element, whatever we want to call it, element. I think this now is a line in the sand in terms of that approach, and there has to be a very direct response to that, and a much more forceful response at an earlier stage.
So taking lessons from that, I'm not sure that Drew Harris said that they're going to take lessons. They certainly talked about evolving their tactics here. Were you expecting something more from the Garda Commissioner today in terms of dealing with a lot of the criticism that's out there over the handling of this?
I think everybody should accept criticism and evolve and learn lessons. I mean, how do we improve things at all? I think, he had said the day after that there would be a review of how things had worked. I think he came into the Oireachtas then today and set out a plan for the future, and it clearly focuses on a stronger response at an earlier stage. So to my mind, that's a development, that's a lesson learned. You can call it whatever you like, but to me, it's a different way of approaching it for the future. It's a focus on making sure that the Gardaí have the more forceful responses available to them at an earlier stage, and being prepared to engage and to use them as has been proved to be necessary.
Is that what people want to see? Is that what grassroots Fine Gael people want to see, Jennifer?
I think they don't want to see the city being taken over. I think they don't want to see looting and criminality. I think they do want to see a strong response, a strong and appropriate response.
And it did happen. And we just heard from Aon there talking about...
Gaon said it wasn't a focus. We were focusing on forceful responses and not community Gardaí. It's not an either-or sort of thing. Yes, 633 new recruits have come into Templemore this year, with more to come in December. 151 are going to attest on December the 15th. And actually, it was supposed to be January, but they're coming out into service on the 15th of December to try to get more Gardaí out onto the streets. So it is about more Gardaí. It is also a focus on community Gardaí. That's certainly my focus locally.
Lag, though,
and there is a focus on improving.
There's a huge lag in this. Like we've talked about, and this discussion has been had since pre-pandemic about, Garda burnout and unhappiness in the force at all levels. We're hearing it from the AGSI, we're hearing it from the GRA. They're not necessarily happy with the response that they got, or what happened in front of the Justice Committee today, and certainly they're not hearing enough from the Justice Minister as far as they're concerned. That's what we've heard from Antoinette Cunningham of the AGSI. I mean, are we talking about just a failure here, that at the bottom line is that Gardaí are not happy and they don't feel satisfied that they can operate safely to manage or control or de-escalate riots?
What do you mean specifically?
I mean specifically when they're talking about their ability to act with force. They don't know if they can even do that. And that's a discussion that we heard from Helen McEntee saying today. We have to review what Gardaí are able to do in these situations.
Well, I think it was the Commissioner and the Minister have been clear in relation to that, and it is a training issue, but I think it is also Gardaí have felt under pressure in relation to this. They have felt under pressure around GSOC, the investigations. It is really appropriate that we have an independent complaints mechanism, but it is true that Gardaí have been worried and that has been building, and you can hear that anecdotally. That down to poor management? And you can hear that anecdotally. Whatever the reasons are, Gardaí need clarity. I mean, our Gardaí are the people who are protecting us at all time. They need to know what they can do clearly at any stage in whatever the response happens to be, and that is an evolving practice as well.
Michael, I think just to get you in on that, your thoughts on that? Yeah. The use of Drew Harris referred to thugs when he was talking about scumbags was something. Then we heard from we did hear you referring to a gobdaw now. So I mean, Aon, you're not averse to use of language in the Dáil, intemperate language or otherwise. But just to come back to the language and how we deal with all of this, Jennifer, your view on that and whether it's becoming increasingly divisive in who we are targeting.
I think it's a real difficulty because people are trying to find expression for what they saw, and people. I mean, like Aon, I was devastated on Thursday and Friday to see my city in that situation and to see the attack on the children in particular, but what followed that. And people are struggling for language to describe going in and looting Arnott's and looting ASICs and looting shops in that way and taking cigarettes and runners and trying to find ways to explain that. And that's a huge challenge. And it's and setting fire to public transport and setting fire to Garda vehicles. So language is a big issue around this. It genuinely is.
What about the calls going, well, why did it come to this? And look, there's an absence of community policing. There's not enough there in your looking if you want to find out the root cause of all of this.
Community policing isn't enough. And I mean,
but isn't it part of the answer?
It is, but it's not enough. I mean, I've worked on youth justice and Garda diversion for nearly 20 years at this stage, and overwhelmingly community policing, the juvenile liaison officers, the Garda youth diversion system, it really works for about 95% of people. It is an excellent system. But for the other 5%, it's not working. And I just feel that there's a cohort of people who don't come through that well and who move into committing significant criminality in their 20s. It's not just me saying that, it's Eddie Darcy and other people.
And this for the public order unit and the tasers come in.
And I would say, no, that's in response to events. But I would say this, like in terms of a response, the focus on resignations, the focus on individuals is a sucker to people who have been agitating, particularly on the far right side. That is not the response. The response is getting the systems right. The response is making sure that it doesn't happen again, and not a focus on individuals.
Agitating the situation. Welcome back. Well, earlier this summer, a series of protests took place in the South Dublin suburb of Ballybrack. Tensions escalated after an attack on a property believed to be earmarked for asylum seekers. Yesterday, in the Dáil, Jennifer Carroll MacNeill called out Sinn Féin for their lack of support.
We came together and we tried to manage this the best way we could for the period, that time, but also for the period ahead, to try to manage this in the best way in the interest of everybody in the community, but also so as not to allow the far right a veto on who moves into Ballybrack. But do you know who wasn't there? Do you know who wasn't there and didn't help me? The Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin representatives locally. You're active on the ground. You had councillors in Killiney Shankill. And the only people who didn't help me and didn't help Cormac Devlin and didn't help Oisin Smith and didn't help Richard Boyd Barrett and didn't help the Gardaí were Sinn Féin.
Well, Jennifer Carroll MacNeill is, of course, with us in studio, also joined by Aon O'Riordan, Michael Healy-Rae and John Lee. And joining us tonight is Sinn Féin representative from the Killiney Shankill area, Shane O'Brien. You're welcome along to the programme tonight. I want to get your reaction there to what Jennifer had to say when they were trying to quell tensions where protests blew up over the housing of asylum seekers. It was at Ridge Hall in Ballybrack. Sinn Féin didn't help. What do you have to say to that charge?
Well, I was quite taken aback by the bizarre rant last night that I heard within the Dáil in terms of the debate on policing and the protests and public safety more generally. Obviously, Minister Carroll MacNeill stated that Sinn Féin councillors weren't helping her, when actually there are no Sinn Féin councillors in Killiney Shankill or indeed any other part.
So just to clarify, you're a representative, you're on the Sinn Féin team.
I'm a former councillor and I'm the general election candidate for Dún Laoghaire.
Okay.
And in relation to not helping, and that's interesting in itself, but let's just say things didn't just kick off in South Dublin and Ballybrack. Indeed, there had been the opening of an asylum centre in Ablana Avenue in Dún Laoghaire a couple of months before. There was a series of protests outside the asylum centre. There was attacks on the asylum centre, and there have been a number of growing concern and hate right across Dún Laoghaire.
So in terms of the charge that was made, and we'll hear from Jennifer again,
it's absolutely,
that Sinn Féin didn't help, what do you say to that?
Well,
did you help?
That's absolute nonsense, Claire, and it's absolute nonsense for a number of reasons. See, when the charge was made against me that Sinn Féin didn't help Jennifer or Sinn Féin didn't help Fine Gael, my job is not to help Fine Gael, it's to help the people of Ballybrack.
Right.
It's to help
so did you
people.
help de-escalate the situation, the tensions that were clearly there in Ballybrack?
Absolutely. We went door to door in the area talking to people. We held meetings with people who were protesting. We went with information to try and dispel some of the myths that some far-right agitators, not even from the area, were coming in and spreading around Ballybrack, around Dún Laoghaire and around elsewhere within Dún Laoghaire.
You didn't engage directly with with Jennifer or with TDs in the area?
I did indeed, yes. So myself and Richard Boyd Barrett, who's also a TD in the area, met with protesters. We met with people from the area, locals living in the area, who had concerns, who had questions, wanted clarity. And we met with those along with councillors, elected councillors and area representatives, and we went and sought answers and got answers, and then again met with some of the people who were protesting to provide them with the information.
Jennifer, what do you say to that?
Okay, I'll have to go through a couple of different things here. One, this protest was organised by a combination of the far right elements. There's no question about that, but also a very strong local element. There was, and I never wanted to have to go through this, but there was a meeting organised with people whom the Gardaí identified as helping, would have been able to influence the protests being called off. And the Gardaí set that meeting up between myself, those individuals and Shane O'Brien with a view to trying to de-escalate the situation. That meeting was to be held on the 27th of July at 2 p.m. in Loughlinstown community rooms. Shortly beforehand, Shane met those individuals. The Garda turned up to facilitate the meeting, which was to be able to answer questions and hopefully de-escalate the situation. As I said, it was the Gardaí who had identified a very significant opportunity to de-escalate the protest from a local perspective, a very important opportunity created by the Gardaí, identified by the Gardaí, set up by the Gardaí. And I arrived in the car park a short number of minutes before the meeting was to be held. Shane informed the Gardaí that he wasn't going to attend this meeting with me. The meeting then didn't happen. It wasn't able to be facilitated. I wasn't there able to answer questions or to be able to deal with this. This was extremely sensitive. I never wanted to have to discuss the particular detail of this, but Shane has pressed this matter.
Well,
and that was the,
in
that
in
is
fairness,
the, that
he
is,
hasn't pressed the matter.
that
You brought
is-
it up
that
in the
is-
Dáil yesterday
yes,
and
this-
made
that
a
is-
point of it.
And because it was important. It is important.
Well,
and I
then,
went door to door.
In fairness,
and
I think
went
the Sinn
door to
Féin
door.
representative in the area has,
And
the,
I
has
went
the right
door
to
to
respond
door
to that.
as well. I went door to door as well. I wrote to everybody. I was extremely public in what I was trying to do. That wasn't replicated, but where my particular disappointment was where the community Gardaí, where the Gardaí more broadly, who were dealing with, where I think we were close to 10 days into protest at that point, or thereabouts. I'd like to check that. But there was an opportunity created by the Gardaí. And what I specifically said, although it cuts off before that, what I specifically said is they had the opportunity with the community Gardaí, they did not.
Okay,
They
so
had the
this is
opportunity to help with the
specifically on that
community Gardaí.
meeting
They
with the
did not.
with the Gardaí.
Yeah.
Is there a reason you didn't?
And instead he comes in here and describes it as a
so I
bizarre show.
have a really good relationship with the community Gardaí, with the senior Garda management in Shankill, in Dún Laoghaire, and I'd been working with them throughout the protests, not just in Ballybrack, but in Dún Laoghaire and likewise.
Okay.
In
But you
terms
didn't
of
want to show up to that particular meeting.
we had actually
organised
just,
by the
we-
Gardaí. You'd
we-
actually just met them, but you
we-
wouldn't meet with the Gardaí and
A
myself.
bit manners, please, and just allow me to finish. In terms of the meeting, we'd already met with people, and the problem was that the government hadn't been listening. No different than a myriad of issues. The government isn't listening to people, and they didn't trust Jennifer Carroll McNeil or any other Fine Gael representative. And our role as community area representatives and activists, and no different than the TDs or the councillors that were present, was to listen to people. And they were really difficult meetings. They were really difficult meetings to hear the fears, the concerns, the things that people were bringing up with us, some of the language that was being used. But I also take umbrage to the fact that everyone, and in that outburst, that bizarre rant last night, that everyone in Ballybrack, and it's happening time and time again, being labelled as far right.
They're not.
They're not far right.
They're not far right. They're not far right. The people of Ballybrack are really good people who were incredibly upset about this protest. You know that, and I know that because I went door to door, spoke to people. I've had meetings with a whole range of different people there. What's coming back to me still is, well, when Sinn Féin get into government, there'll be no international protection applicants. They'll sort it out. There was an attack in Ablana. Myself and Oisín were down there the next morning to try to provide support, to provide detail. But I'm actually glad we have this
What are you
opportunity.
saying there, Jennifer, when you say when Sinn Féin get into government?
This is what I'm being fed. This is what I'm being told.
So you're being
This is what I'm
told that
being
Sinn
told.
Féin are giving
Yes.
a message
This
to
is what I'm being told.
their voters
This is what I'm being
that
told.
this will
Now,
change under
this is
Sinn
the
Féin
opportunity
government.
to clarify this, actually. This is the opportunity, sorry.
I'd like just to
This
give
is the
Shane an opportunity to clarify
this,
that.
that is not
Thank
so.
you.
That in fact you're
This-
not against
This is
in
actually
Ballybrack.
following on in terms of trend. So in terms of the rant last night, let's call it what it is, a rant. It was a rant to do what? To distract from the events of Thursday, the horrific attack, the stabbing of 3 children, a creche manager, and the subsequent riots that followed. Yesterday was a strategic rant aimed to distract from the events
be
in
further
Dublin.
from the truth.
And what we're having now, and in terms of this next claim, is again another distraction tactic to distract from Jennifer's failings, Fine Gael's failings in terms of housing, in terms of police, and
then,
so
I'm sorry,
on.
may I respond? First of all, I am entitled to set out in the Dáil, as you have said. Second of all, your supporters and a whole range of people on social media pointed out to me that you don't have councillors in Killiney. I said that you'd had it. I know the political representation because you and I ran against each other in Killiney Shankill, and the outcome was the way you and I both know it. But I just want to be very clear that you are in fact supportive of international protection applicants moving into Ridge Hall in Ballybrack should that opportunity arise.
But
you're openly supportive of that, are you?
In terms of international protection, and I want to say, I've been working in terms of integration work for over 20 years, since I was 15 actually in school, and I continue to do so. I've been supportive in terms of the asylum seekers in Dún Laoghaire, in terms of helping integrate them with communities.
Just on the issue that I suppose prompted all the protests in Ballybrack, where does Sinn Féin stand?
Well, I think actually a letter provided by Jennifer actually stated that...
Is that a yes?
Jennifer, that the centre or the place in Ridge Hall, the building is actually being destroyed because of the protest.
Okay.
No, it's
been destroyed because of the protest. We've had families...
Okay.
Wait, no, sorry, 1 second. We've had families living above the proposed centre that were evacuated. Families with young kids.
I know those families.
All right,
and they're living in apartments adjacent to it, and it's not being...
It's not suitable right now for housing.
Because
from my understanding,
it's not flooded. But it's not being destroyed. It's not being destroyed.
Let's broaden this out. I'm just conscious that we are speaking about one area where protests are occurring, but of course it is not the only area around the country. Row is also not a new row. But what do we do in this instance, Jennifer, when we're seeing a situation now that we have people homeless without a place to stay for up to 10 weeks. We've also seen the reaction, and we're worried about what we saw in the riots last week, that burning of tents have already occurred in migrant camps, and that we could see a repeat of this situation again, especially with a growing number of people now finding themselves on the streets.
And we certainly don't want that, and we've done everything we can to try to accommodate people. I think we've found an extra 10,000 beds for international protection applicants, and they are places where we wouldn't normally always house people. For example, in Blackrock, there is an old Zurich, a commercial building which is unused, which is currently being repurposed for up to 400 international protection applicants. So we are converting premises that we wouldn't have considered using for homeless families traditionally. These are not perfect, they're not great accommodation, but they are better than tents. And we are trying to find accommodation in all sorts of different places to make sure that people aren't in tents. But we are reaching the limit of what we can do. We have managed to find further further accommodation, but we are signalling, we will continue to try to find buildings. This one hasn't come on stream yet. We will look at further opportunities of this kind, but this hasn't yet been, people haven't yet been housed there. So that will take some of the pressure off once that's ready. And I do expect that in the coming, over the Christmas period into January, I do expect that to be available. So that will take some pressure off, and we will continue to try to work to find buildings. Yes, but we don't have an endless and constant stream of new premises coming.
It does come back though
to
strategy here, and this criticism that has been levelled at government again and again, that there is no joined up strategy, that a lot of it is being lumped on Roderick O'Gorman's office, and that we've come to this situation now that there is a change of tone from government with regards how many people we can take in. Would you agree that there's a change of tone?
I think there's a certain reality being expressed.
An immigration conversation before that you were afraid to have before.
No, it's not about being afraid. It's about being honest. I mean, when we were continuing to find premises, we didn't have this pressure. We were signalling we have a pressure. We are running out of accommodation. We are trying to find more. Example, Blackrock, and we are in a practical difficulty, and we are facing that practical challenge.